Eli Garrett stared at her phone, the group text glowing like a warning sign in the darkness of her apartment. Family meeting, Sunday, 3 p.m, be punctual. No greeting, no context. Just Marla's signature coldness wrapped in 7 words. Her stepmother had never been one for warmth, but this felt different. The last family gathering had been Grandpa's funeral 2 months ago, where Marla had worn designer sunglasses indoors and whispered about moving forward before the dirt had even settled. "Bring your documents," the second message read. No emoji, no explanation, just the chilling formality of someone preparing for war while serving tea. Eli's hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down. In 27 years, she'd learned to read the subtext in Marla's messages. This wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush with dessert plates. Ever walked into a room knowing you were the prey? Stick around, this story gets colder before it burns. And if you've ever been cornered by your own bloodline, subscribe. You're not alone anymore. Sunday arrived like a storm cloud, and Eli found herself standing outside her childhood home, hand hovering over the doorbell. The house looked the same. White colonial with black shutters, the garden Grandpa had tended now professionally manicured into submission. Everything looked perfect, which made it feel wrong. She could still turn back, drive away, let them have their meeting without her. But Grandpa's voice echoed in her memory. "Garretts don't run from hard conversations, kiddo. We just bring better arguments." The door opened before she could knock. Marla stood there in cream cashmere and pearls, her smile as practiced as a pageant queen's. "Eli, so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Eli replied, matching the fake warmth note for note. The living room had been rearranged like a boardroom, coffee table cleared, chairs positioned for maximum intimidation. Her step-siblings, Cassandra and Blake, sat ramrod straight, their expressions unreadable. But it was the 2 strangers in suits that made Eli's stomach drop. "These are our family advisors," Marla said smoothly, "to help us navigate this difficult time." Family advisors, not lawyers, but close enough to make Eli glad she'd brought her own ammunition. A folder thick with screenshots, bank records, and one very important sealed envelope. Eli had been 10 when her father died. One moment he was teaching her to ride a bike, the next he was gone, a drunk driver's casual destruction of her entire world. Grandpa John Garrett had stepped in without hesitation, transforming from weekend grandfather to full-time parent overnight. He'd been 70 then, a war veteran who'd built Garrett Construction with his bare hands and an iron will. Other men his age were retiring to golf courses. Grandpa was learning to braid hair and pack school lunches, attending parent-teacher conferences with the same intensity he'd once reserved for blueprint meetings. "Your dad would want you strong," he'd tell her, teaching her to read construction plans instead of fairy tales. "Not hard. There's a difference. Hard breaks, strong bends, but doesn't break." When Eli was 19, Grandpa had surprised everyone by remarrying. Marla swept in like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, all charity galas and social media presence. She was everything Grandpa wasn't. Polished, connected, obsessed with appearances. "Your grandfather built blueprints, I build influence," Marla had said at their wedding reception, champagne flute raised high. Grandpa had just smiled. That quiet smile Eli knew meant he was thinking something he wouldn't say. Later he'd pulled Eli aside. "Some things shouldn't be temporary, kiddo. Remember that." Marla brought her own children into the fold, Cassandra, Blake, and Jonah. They were older than Eli, already shaped by their mother's ambitions. Family dinners became performances, every conversation a subtle negotiation for position. Eli never quite fit into Marla's curated version of family. She was too much like Grandpa, preferred work boots to heels, honest conversation to strategic small talk. While her step-siblings posted carefully staged family photos, Eli was on construction sites, learning the business from the foundation up. "You could be so much more," Marla would say, eyeing Eli's paint-stained jeans with barely concealed disdain. "With the right guidance." But Eli had all the guidance she needed. Every morning at 5 a.m. she and Grandpa would share coffee and go over the day's projects. He taught her that integrity wasn't just a business principle, it was a life philosophy. "They'll come for you one day," he'd said once, watching Marla orchestrate another family photo shoot. "They'll come smiling. Don't smile back unless you mean it." 2 months ago, Grandpa's heart finally gave out. He'd been working until the end, reviewing plans for a new community centre from his hospital bed. His last words to Eli, "Built to last, kiddo, you and the company both." The funeral had been Marla's production, flowers arranged for maximum Instagram impact, eulogies that sounded more like LinkedIn recommendations. Eli had stood in the back, wearing Grandpa's old construction jacket, trying not to scream at the performative grief surrounding her. And now here they were, gathered for a family meeting that felt more like a corporate takeover. The will reading had taken place 6 weeks ago in the wood-panelled office of Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Chen. The room smelled of leather and old paper, every surface polished to intimidation. Marla had arrived in black Chanel, tissue strategically clutched, her children flanking her like a security detail. Eli had come alone, wearing the same blazer she'd worn to every important meeting with Grandpa. It still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco. Mr. Chen had cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and delivered the news that shifted the family's tectonic plates. "To my granddaughter, Eli Garrett, I leave the house on Sycamore Street, Garrett Construction Company in its entirety, and all associated accounts and assets." The silence that followed was deafening. Eli felt the air leave the room, sucked out by the collective intake of breath from Marla's side of the table. She kept her eyes on Mr. Chen, afraid to look anywhere else. "There must be some mistake," Marla said, her voice honey-sweet with an edge of steel. "John and I discussed his wishes extensively." Mr. Chen's expression didn't change. "The will is quite clear, Mrs. Garrett. There are provisions for you, of course, the vacation home in Aspen, a generous monthly allowance, and your personal accounts remain untouched." "Generous," Blake muttered under his breath. Cassandra's perfectly manicured nails dug into her designer purse. "This is unexpected." Only Jonah, the youngest at 22, seemed genuinely surprised rather than angry. He caught Eli's eye and offered what might have been a sympathetic grimace. "There's also this," Mr. Chen continued, producing a sealed envelope, "to be opened by Eli at a time of her choosing." Eli took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written across it in Grandpa's careful script. She could feel Marla's eyes burning holes through the paper. The walk to the parking lot felt like crossing a minefield. Marla caught up to her at her truck, Grandpa's old F-150 that Eli had inherited years ago. "Eli, dear," Marla began, her hand on the truck door, "I'm sure you're overwhelmed. This is such a big responsibility for someone so young." "I'm 27, Marla." "Of course, but running a company, managing properties, it's not like working on site. There are complexities, relationships to maintain, decisions that affect whole families." Marla's smile never wavered. "I'd hate to see John's legacy crumble because of inexperience. Grandpa taught me everything I need to know." "Did he?" Marla's voice dropped the sweetness. "Did he teach you about the loans I co-signed? The partnerships I brokered? The clients who only stay because of my connections?" Eli met her stepmother's gaze steadily. "He taught me that everything important is in writing." That night, the messages started. First, Cassandra. "We should talk about what's fair. Call me." Then Blake. "Don't you think Grandpa would want us to share his legacy? We're family." Extended relatives Eli hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered she existed. "Thinking of you in this difficult time," they wrote. "Let's discuss the family's future." Every message felt like another stone added to a wall being built around her. They weren't reaching out, they were reaching for what she'd inherited. Eli sat in Grandpa's study that night, surrounded by his things: construction awards, family photos, blueprints for buildings that would outlast them all. She pulled out her laptop and began documenting everything, every text, every call, every veiled threat wrapped in concern. "They'll come smiling," she whispered to the empty room. "Don't smile back." The pressure intensified over the following weeks. Anonymous notes appeared under Eli's apartment door. "You know what's right. Family shares. Don't be selfish." The handwriting was carefully generic, but the message was clear. They were watching, waiting, pressing. Her phone rang constantly with concern from relatives who'd previously forgotten she existed. "How are you holding up, dear?" they'd ask. "Such a big burden for one person. Wouldn't it be easier to share the responsibility?" Aunt Helen, who hadn't attended Grandpa's funeral due to a scheduling conflict, called 3 times in one day. "I'm worried about you, Eli, all alone with such pressure. Your grandfather wouldn't want you to struggle." "I'm not struggling," Eli replied, "but you could have help, family help. We could form a board, make decisions together." Eli hung up. Meanwhile, Marla's social media became a masterclass in passive aggression. Photos of her at the country club, captions about healing through grace, and when family disappoints you, choose peace. One post showed her in designer heels at a charity gala, honouring John's memory by giving back. "Legacy of love, ye healing, Tosh family first." The comments from her followers were supportive, sympathetic. Poor Marla dealing with such difficulty, such grace under pressure. What kind of granddaughter would leave her step-grandmother to struggle? Eli screenshot everything. On a particularly bad day, when the anonymous calls had reached double digits, Eli drove to Grace Pendleton's house. Grace had been Grandpa's legal advisor for 30 years, officially retired but never really gone. She lived in a Victorian that looked like it could withstand a siege, which felt appropriate. "They're circling," Eli said without preamble when Grace opened the door. "Of course they are. Come in, I have coffee and strategy." Grace's kitchen was a war room disguised as domestic comfort. Legal books shared space with cookie jars, and her laptop sat open next to a plate of homemade scones. "Show me everything," Grace commanded. For 2 hours they reviewed the messages, the posts, the escalating pressure. Grace's expression grew grimmer with each piece of evidence. "This isn't a family dispute," she said finally. "It's a pressure campaign. They're trying to break you down, make you feel guilty enough or scared enough to capitulate." "Is it working?" Eli asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Grace's hand covered hers. "You're here, aren't you? Fighting back is the opposite of breaking down." "What do I do?" "Document everything. Prepare like this is going to court because it might." "And Eli?" Grace's eyes sharpened. "Check the company books, all of them, especially anything Marla had access to. I think you need to know exactly what you inherited, the good and the questionable." That night, Eli went through Garrett Construction's records with forensic attention. Most of it was exactly what she expected. Grandpa's meticulous management, fair deals, honest business. But there were anomalies, withdrawals labelled consultant fees that matched the dates of Marla's spa retreats, contracts with companies that seemed to exist only on paper, all countersigned by Marla as family representative. "They're not grieving," Eli told Grace over the phone. "They're calculating." "Good," Grace replied. "So are you. Be ready for their next move." The next move came via group text. Family meeting, Sunday, 3 p.m. Let's handle this like adults. Like adults. As if Eli was the child for following Grandpa's explicit wishes. She spent the next 3 days preparing like a general before battle. Every receipt printed, every suspicious transaction highlighted. Grace helped her organize it all into a damning portfolio of financial creativity. You could take this to the police, Grace suggested. Not yet, Eli decided. Let them show their hand first. Sunday arrived with unusual March warmth, the kind that makes everything feel slightly off balance. Eli dressed carefully. Grandpa's watch, her father's cufflinks, her own armour of quiet confidence. The sealed envelope from Grandpa sat in her jacket pocket, a weight she wasn't ready to open. She arrived at exactly 3 p.m. Not early, not late. Exactly on time. The house felt different the moment she entered. Furniture rearranged. Grandpa's photos moved to less prominent positions. Marla was already erasing him, redecorating his life into something more palatable for her aesthetic. Eli, Marla greeted her, air-kissing like they were at a society function. So glad you could join us. You know everyone, of course. And these are our advisors, Mr. Paulson and Ms. Chen, no relation to your grandfather's attorney. The advisors smiled with the practiced warmth of people paid to be pleasant. They had tablets and folders, the tools of civilized warfare. Please sit, Marla gestured to a chair positioned to make Eli feel surrounded. We have a lot to discuss, Cassandra cleared her throat. We've been thinking about Grandpa's wishes. His wishes were in the will, Eli interrupted calmly. Blake leaned forward. Wills can be contested, especially when they don't reflect the deceased's true intentions. And you know his true intentions? We know, Marla said smoothly, that John would never want to tear this family apart. He built his company on fairness, on taking care of everyone. This current situation doesn't reflect those values. Mr. Paulson opened his tablet. We've prepared a redistribution agreement, very generous considering. You would retain 20% of the company, a fair portion of the assets, and the family home would be shared on a rotating schedule. 20%, Eli repeated. More than fair for someone with limited business experience, Miss Chen added. The family would handle the complex operations, leaving you free to pursue your own interests. My interests are the company? Of course, Marla's smile could have frozen hell, which is why 20% is so generous. You'd still be involved, just appropriately. The agreement slid across the table like a snake, multiple pages of legal language designed to strip away everything Grandpa had built, everything he'd left her. Eli didn't touch it. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her own folder. Before we discuss redistribution, she said, matching Marla's fake pleasant tone, perhaps we should discuss these. The first photo hit the table. Marla at a resort in Sedona, timestamp matching a business trip, expense to the company. That was, Marla started, the second photo. Bank statements showing withdrawals matching those spa trips. You don't understand. The third document. Contracts with shell companies. Marla's signature authorizing payments for services never rendered. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The advisors exchanged glances, their pleasant facades cracking. Did you use Grandpa's signature? Eli asked calmly, placing another document on the table. A contract dated 2 days after Grandpa had been admitted to the hospital. Marla's carefully composed face finally cracked. He was sick, confused. Someone had to make decisions. You weren't authorized to make those decisions. I was his wife. You were his wife who was stealing from him. How dare you? I dare because I have evidence. Every transaction, every forged signature, every shell company. Did you really think Grandpa didn't notice? That he didn't keep copies of everything? Blake stood up, his face red. You're making accusations you can't prove. I'm not making accusations, I'm showing receipts. Cassandra's voice was shrill. This is entrapment. You came here to... I came here because you invited me. To discuss redistribution of assets you've already been redistributing for years. It was Jonah who broke the stalemate. The youngest, the quietest, the one who'd always seemed uncomfortable at these family performances. He stood slowly, his face pale but determined. I didn't know, he said quietly, about any of it. I thought... He looked at his mother, something breaking in his expression. I thought we were better than this. Jonah, sit down, Marla commanded. No. He moved around the table, stopping beside Eli's chair. I won't be part of this anymore. You ungrateful... The front door opened, cutting off Marla's tirade. Grace Pendleton walked in like she owned the place, which, given her history with the family, she practically did. She surveyed the scene with the satisfaction of a chess master seeing the board exactly as expected. This meeting is now over, Grace stated. The advisors looked visibly panicked, tablets clutched like life preservers. You can't just... I can and I am. My client has attempted good faith negotiation. You've responded with coercion and ignored evidence of financial malfeasance. Any further communication will go through proper legal channels. Your client? Marla stood trembling with rage. This is a family meeting. No, Eli said, standing as well. This was an ambush, and it failed. She gathered her documents with steady hands, leaving the photos of Marla's theft on the table. Let them stare at the evidence of their own greed. This isn't over, Blake threatened. Eli paused at the doorway, Jonah beside her, Grace at her back. You're right. It's not over. It's just beginning. I suggest you all get better lawyers. You're making a mistake, Marla's voice cracked, the polished facade finally shattered completely. You don't know what you're doing. You'll ruin everything John built. No, Eli replied. I'm preventing someone else from ruining it. She walked out, Jonah matching her stride, Grace following with the satisfaction of a job well done. The door slammed behind them, a punctuation mark on years of manipulation. In the driveway, Jonah stopped. I'm sorry for all of it. I should have seen... You see it now. That's what matters. What happens next? Eli looked at her youngest stepbrother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not Marla's son, but his own person, choosing his own path. What happens next is we rebuild, honestly this time. Grace patted Jonah's shoulder. You did the right thing in there. It doesn't feel like it, he admitted. The right thing rarely does in the moment, Grace replied. That's how you know it's right. As they drove away, Eli felt the weight of the sealed envelope in her pocket. Grandpa's last words. Waiting. But not yet. First, she had a company to protect and a legacy to honour. The Monday after the confrontation, Eli arrived at Garrett Construction's office at 5 a.m., just like she used to with Grandpa. The building was quiet, waiting. She made coffee in his old percolator, the ritual as comforting as prayer. She found his note in the bottom drawer of his desk, tucked beneath blueprints for the community centre he'd never built. Written in his careful hand. Eli has what the others didn't. Restraint. If she chooses wisely, this company will outlive us all. Build something that matters, kiddo. The tears came then, finally. Not for the battle with Marla, not for the greed and betrayal, but for the simple faith of a grandfather who'd seen her clearly and trusted her completely. By 7 a.m. the office was humming with activity. Foremen who'd worked with Grandpa for decades stopped by, offering support with gruff handshakes and promises to keep building it right. They'd been waiting, she realized, to see if she was truly John Garrett's heir in spirit as well as law. We've got your back, Tom, the senior foreman told her. Your grandpa, he knew what was what. Told us you'd do right by the company. When did he tell you that? "Last month he was here. Said changes were coming, but the foundation would hold." Tom grinned. "Guess he meant you." Over the following weeks, Eli implemented her vision. She funded Jonah's return to college with a trust. No strings attached, no obligations. He'd chosen engineering, wanting to build things that lasted. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. She reopened the community center project, Grandpa's last dream. The plans were perfect, just waiting for someone with the courage to see them through. At the groundbreaking, she had a sign installed: Garrett Community Center, built with honor. Marla's legal threats materialized and evaporated like morning mist once Eli's lawyers presented the evidence of embezzlement. Suddenly, Marla was very interested in putting the past behind us and moving forward as a family. Her lawyers negotiated a quiet exit. She kept the Aspen house and her allowance in exchange for dropping all claims and staying away from the company. Blake and Cassandra made one last attempt, a weepy phone call about family bonds and Grandpa's true wishes. Eli listened politely, then hung up. Some bridges were meant to burn. A month later, a soft email appeared in her inbox. Cassandra, writing alone: "I'm sorry for everything. If you ever want to have coffee, real coffee, not strategy, I'd like to know my stepsister. The real one." Eli read it twice, then archived it. Not a no, but not yet. Forgiveness, Grandpa had taught her, was like construction. It needed a solid foundation and time to cure properly. The sealed envelope remained unopened on her desk for 2 months. She knew what was inside now, had always known. Not money or secrets, but permission. Permission to be exactly who she was, to build the life and company that reflected her values, not Marla's performance or anyone else's expectations. When she finally opened it, the message was simple. "They'll test you, kiddo. Pass the test by being yourself. The company isn't the legacy. You are. Build something that matters. Love. Grandpa." Below that, a postscript. "P.S. Check the frame behind my Korean War photo. Sometimes the best defense is good documentation." Behind the photo, Eli found a USB drive. On it, years of meticulous records. Every suspicious transaction, every forged document, every piece of evidence Grandpa had quietly collected. He'd known all along, had been protecting the company and her even while sick. "You clever old fox," Eli whispered, laughing through tears. 6 months later, Garrett Construction was thriving. The community centre was halfway built, ahead of schedule and under budget. Jonah worked part-time on site, learning the trade from the ground up. He'd legally changed his last name to Garrett, a choice that had caused Marla to block him on all social media platforms. "She'll come around," he said one day over lunch. "Maybe," Eli replied, "but we're not waiting for it." Grace Pendleton became an official board member, her legal mind a fortress against future manipulation. At their first board meeting, she raised a toast. To John Garrett, who knew that the best inheritance isn't what you leave behind, it's who you raise up. The company adopted a new motto, "Built with honor." It appeared on every truck, every hard hat, every business card, a promise and a reminder. Eli kept Grandpa's office exactly as he'd left it, except for one addition. Next to his photos, she placed one of her own, her and Jonah at the community centre, groundbreaking, hard hats on, shovels in hand, building something that mattered. Sometimes, late at night when the office was quiet, she'd sit in his chair and feel his presence. Not a ghost, but a foundation. Everything he'd taught her, everything he'd trusted her with, solid beneath her feet. "Some inheritances come in cash," she'd tell people who asked about the family drama. "Others come in clarity. I didn't spend a dime of that." The last time she saw Marla was at a charity event. Marla was holding court, telling anyone who'd listen about her difficult journey, and how she'd chosen peace over conflict. She spotted Eli across the room, and for a moment their eyes met. Eli didn't smile back. She simply nodded, acknowledgement without forgiveness, and turned to continue her conversation with the mayor about the community centre's youth programs. Garretts don't run from hard conversations. They just bring better arguments. And sometimes the best argument is a life well lived, a company well run, and a legacy honoured not in words but in actions. Build something that matters. She was. Have you ever been betrayed by those who once called you family? Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's in the will. It's the strength to stand alone when everyone else chooses sides. Share your story below, and remember, family isn't always blood, but chosen loyalty. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. Here at Whispers of Revenge, we believe justice has a quiet voice, but together we amplify it.